It's time to talk Denver Broncos football on the Lads Football Network. And for the very first time, we have a new guest covering the Denver Broncos. Matter of fact, he is also covering the Broncos full time for the first time for the DNVR.com. Henry Chisholm. Thanks, Henry, for taking your time to talk to us today.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you got it, Henry. I know it's late in the game pretty much. We only have another 24 hours before free agency kicks off. But the draft is next month. And really, that's why I'm trying to pick your brain on what's going on with the Denver Broncos. So without a first-round draft pick, I got to believe fans are pretty stoked for now. And I can imagine, too. I was just going over the depth chart at our lads, just prepping for the show, and I hadn't looked at the depth chart for a week. And so I'm looking at the depth chart and I'm going, oh, really? Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay, I didn't know that, because I've been so busy the last day or two with everything else going on in the world. I did not know that. And again, Arledge is kind of making sure, even though it's not official till tomorrow, they're saying, hey, man, it's going to be official now. And so 4 impact players that have been signed already.
Yeah, and to be honest, nobody really expected that. We knew that they cleared enough cap space, about $20 million, that they were up to, I think, 7th in the NFL going into free agency. But still, you see $33 million in cap space. You don't expect them to go spend $200 million in cash on the first day of free agency. So it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, we're going to go over exactly how that all affects the roster now. So before we do that, what's the draft capital look like?
So as of right now, they have 2 third-round picks, both in the first 5 picks of the third round. They have a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick, and that is it. So it's not going to be the most exciting time in Denver.
But it is possible with those 2 early thirds that they could move into the second if they needed to. That makes a lot of sense.
And on top of that, there's a lot of trade rumors, specifically Cortland Sutton, and who knows what you get for him, but who knows? Maybe you throw a 5th in and you can get into the second that way.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see if anything comes.
Well, let's start with that then. Again, I'm not there. That's what you're here for. So, Cortland Sutton, give us a player or two that could be dealt.
Yeah, so I think the receivers are where the buzz has been the last couple of days, with Cortland Sutton kind of being the headliner of all that. It would take quite a bit of draft capital to pull Jerry Jeudy out of this offense. KJ Hamler, if they trade him, he hasn't really done much. Yeah. He's been kind of banged up, so you're not looking at a very significant return. Yeah. Cortland Sutton is the big one. There'd been some whispers of a potential Garrett Bowles trade. Again, that seems unlikely, but he is a starting left tackle, and if you were to trade him, you'd imagine you'd get some significant capital in return. But if there is a trade, a notable trade, it's probably Cortland Sutton. There is a small chance it could be an outside linebacker. They do have not necessarily a bunch of top line guys, but some younger players who other teams could be interested in. But again, you're picking up a 6th or a 7th or something like that.
So nothing significant except you're saying maybe Sutton. And
yep.
Yeah, what is going on there with that wide receiver group? Because, boy, the injuries, that's just been terrible. So if they're all healthy, though, Jeudy has been still inconsistent. He hasn't really lived up to that status at this point. They expected him to be like a star by this point.
Exactly. And I think, I believe he finished 22nd in the NFL in receiving yards last year, which is solid. But when it's Jerry Jeudy, based on the hype, based on being a top 15 draft pick, you expect more from him at that point. And again, you can put some of the blame on the offense, whether that's Russell Wilson or Nathaniel Hackett or whatever else, but he has underperformed. He hasn't been a bad receiver, but he just hasn't quite been the playmaker. He hasn't been the Pro Bowler that the Broncos expected when they drafted him.
What's missing from his game? Anything specific?
I would say more than anything, it's the contested catches. There aren't a lot of jump balls that he wins. Sometimes when he's trying to cross the middle of the field, there's linebackers there, there's safeties there. He can be just a little bit contact shy.
Okay.
So I would say that's the biggest thing, is just the tough catches. But his strength is getting open, so you'd think that the footwork and all that would mean you don't have to deal with too much of that. But if he were to become a jump ball threat or contested catch threat, that could be what takes him to the next level.
There's still a lot of hope that he's going to turn the corner, especially with Russell there in year 2 and all, and Sean Payton there now, of course, that he's still going to be the man.
And Sean Payton is the big one because you've just seen how he's been able to get receivers open. Just all the philosophies, knowing what one or two things each player is really good at, and then building off of those. And I think that last year was kind of this guy does this on this role, and we're going to scheme guys open. I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Payton says, that's Jerry Jeudy. Let's see if we can get him in one-on-one coverage and then just take that matchup.
So it seems to me then that, and who knows, I mean, Sutton could still be here with the Broncos, but it's still, they have to do something about adding some depth. And if Sutton gets traded, then that's definitely a priority to add then an impact player at that position. Wouldn't that be the case?
Probably, yeah. And, last offseason, everybody was excited. Everybody in Denver was excited about the receivers because you have Jerry Jeudy, who is sort of primed for a breakout year. Cortland Sutton's been to a Pro Bowl. Tim Patrick has a case to be the best of the bunch. KJ Hamler, when he's been on the field, he's electric. Yeah. He can provide the speed, provide the big plays, get everybody open underneath by just pulling defenders downfield. But then you get into the season, Tim Patrick tears his ACL before the season. KJ Hamler winds up dealing with a bunch of different injuries as he's trying to recover from an ACL and a hip thing that happened the year before. So you lose that depth, and all of a sudden that four-man rotation that you were kind of counting on just disappeared. And Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton didn't quite do as much as people expected. You did see Kendall Hinton show that he can be kind of that slot guy, the underneath player, but asking him to be any more than your fourth, fifth receiver, that's just a big ask. Montrell Washington, the rookie, barely even saw the field as a receiver. Yeah. Exactly. So you're it's just a position that's in flux right now. And there is a chance that you play out the season with Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, and you wind up at the end of the season saying, wow, we just had three guys put up 800 yards and two of them hit 1,000.
Sure.
Like, that wouldn't shock anybody with Sean Payton coming to town. It just feels like they didn't get enough juice out of that position last year, and that's why there could be change.
Speaking of the receivers, Dulcich had a really, he had a pretty nice rookie season. He showed glimpses of what he could become. Another player that banged up a little bit, but overall, it's very tough for rookie tight ends to make the transition into the NFL. I think he did a pretty good job. I know what he did at UCLA, so that's an exciting player to keep an eye on, isn't he?
Yes. People are really excited about him. Like you said, he has the injuries, primarily the hamstring that was kind of bothering him, which is something that is concerning going forward. Yeah. But despite missing some time, 411 receiving yards, second most of any rookie last year, the best on a per game basis, I think pretty easily last season. So as a receiver, you really like what he does. He's great getting downfield. He has a decent sense of where the holes are opening up in coverage. Lacking still as a blocker, though. How much of that is him just being a young guy, getting acclimated? You'd imagine that he improves. The question is just how much. Does he become somebody who you want out there blocking?
Probably not.
That seems like probably a stretch. But if he does add that part of his game, then you could be looking at a Pro Bowl type of tight end.
And again, we're remembering that Denver does not have. It's not just they don't have the first round, but you got to get to the third. So even though it's a deep class of tight ends, there'll be probably about the 4 or 5 of the really good ones that'll be gone by the time you get to Denver in the third. Not saying they need a tight end, but depth at the tight end position is maybe something to keep an eye on. But overall, when I look at the offense, I'm saying that running back situation looks intriguing because you got Williams coming off the injury. You have the 2 free agents. There's really not much else at this current time to look at. So even if, we know Williams is coming back, but does it make any sense for Denver to bring back either free agent, or do you think this is definitely a position through free agency or maybe even the draft that they're going to seriously look to add?
They're going to need at least 2 more running backs somehow. Because Javonte Williams' injury, the torn ACL, beginning of October, you'd expect him to be back around the start of the season. The problem is he also tore the PCL, and the recovery from that injury is a lot scarier. So, I mean, the odds of him coming back and being himself next year, honestly, pretty slim. The recovery time is probably at least a year. And so I think that if you're looking at this season, maybe you say reasonably he's back around midseason, and optimistically he's back, start of October. But because of how just kind of untrustworthy he is at this point because of the injury, you need to find some sort of production. Latavius Murray was great for the Broncos last season when they brought him in, signed him off the Saints practice squad. Kind of a slow start the first few games. I think it was the last 7 games of the season he started, though, and in those starts put up 5.1, 5.2 yards per carry, 70 yards per game. He is 33 now, so you wonder if that happens again next year if you bring him back. But he'd be a cheap option. He'd be somebody who fits, obviously played for Sean Payton in the past, kind of bridge the culture gap. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring him back. I think there might be testing out options, maybe letting him see what his value's worth after that season. But even on top of that, you probably add more, because right now they've got Demaria Crockett, Tyler Beatty, guys who probably don't want to give the ball to because they've really proven nothing. Exactly. And you just can't go into that. So I think there's a case for drafting a running back in the 3rd round. I think there's a case for going after Deontay Foreman, somebody like that, and kind of building this committee and hoping that Javonte comes back and is that guy. But they're adding at least 2 more players to this room as it stands now.
Yeah, and the running back position normally is pretty easy to find. If you need a 1-year guy, maybe like Murray, or if you go into the draft into the 5th and the 6th round, you can grab a guy who becomes a starter. So that's probably the least of their worries of figuring that out. But the offensive line, we opened it up with the free agent news, and to add both McGlinchey and Ben Powers to the offensive line must have been a dream for Denver fans. And now you look at the offensive line, all of a sudden you say, well, maybe if we improve the center position, and we're in good shape.
Yeah. I mean, you're at least paying 3 guys like they should be studs for you. I mean, they made Mike McGlinchey the 4th highest paid right tackle. I think Ben Powers is going to wind up with the biggest contract for a guard in this cycle. Garrett Bowles, you're paying him, and he's been an All-Pro before. So you have those 3, plus you have Quinn Miners, who, if he winds up being the best of the bunch this year, I will not be shocked. When he is out there, he is just so physical and so mobile that the sky is really the limit for him. Like you said, the center position, Lloyd Cushenberry, that is the one spot you wonder about. He went to IR last year. He told us that he could have come back off of IR in the last few weeks of the season. The Broncos chose to run Graham Glasgow out there instead, who had started 10, 12 games in his place. So I think that might tell you something. In particular, the run blocking with Lloyd, he struggles to get to the second level. He doesn't have the most functional strength. The anchor and pass protection isn't really there, but he has the long arms to kind of bail him out, doesn't let anybody get by him. So you could probably get by given what you've invested in the 4 other spots, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's a deep center class, right?
It starts at least. It starts. The thing about what's interesting in Denver's position is that the top center probably doesn't even get drafted until early in the 2nd round. So, but overall, the center position and even the guard positions, you are looking at guys that, like, for instance, the kid from Michigan is probably more of a early third round type of player. It makes a lot of sense. I guess the question that though is, look, it's the same GM. He goes out, he adds a center in the 5th round last year. Well, you're not just wasting the pick. So you do that for a reason. You like the guy, you want to develop him. So is even that potentially part of their plans?
I mean, it's potentially, right? They spent a 5th round pick on him, but when he was on the field, I can't remember which game it was. It was right around week 12. They put Luke Wattenberg on the field, and the results were not good. He got pulled pretty quickly.
Well, that's to be expected as a rookie. Yeah,
definitely. But I mean, it was like a couple of snaps and a couple of sacks, and they yanked him. He was also a 25-year-old rookie, and so that causes concern. But I mean, like you said, it's the same GM. They only have so many draft picks to play with. You might let Lloyd Cushenberry just run through this final year of his contract and deal with it next offseason, especially given what you've already invested. But that is one of the spots on the roster that fans at least are really circling, saying, like, because if you draft a guy in the 3rd round, there is a good chance he beats out Lloyd
Cushenberry. I don't think you're drafting a guy in the 3rd round to not start him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's definitely in the conversation for one of those back-to-back 3rd round picks.
And by the way, Risner's not coming back then?
Yeah, so Dalton Risner. He hasn't signed a contract yet, but no, he's not coming back. I'd imagine $8 to $10 million a year is probably
really?
where he
Okay,
stands.
yeah, obviously.
I
he's
think
not
so.
coming back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see. Yeah.
Are any of the free agents on offense coming back?
So I talked about Latavius Murray.
Yeah.
He's definitely the one you say he's probably back. I think that Graham Glasgow is probably not back, but he would fit well because again, like that's competition for the starting center spot at the very least. He graded out pretty well last season, and he started 15 games because they had so many injuries along that offensive line. So you could see him kind of being the swing backup for all three interior line spots. And if you could get him for $3-4 million, they'd have to consider that. Outside of those two, though.
Well, the players
like
aren't they're not marquee guys anyway. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's like Cam Fleming. Does he wind up getting $5 million a year? In that case, he's not back. But if you can get him for a vet minimum, then why not let him be your backup tackle? It's not like you can draft a guy and justify a third-round pick when you have these two tackles.
All right, let's talk defense. And again, more pickups. Zach Allen up front. We knew that was going to be a need. Alex Singleton. Yep. Now, I know that there's definitely an opportunity to upgrade, but I was kind of a little bit surprised that Alex Singleton landed with the Broncos. So that really works out pretty well now. That you don't have to worry about inside. You got Jewel, and not that he's a star, but he's a serviceable kind of player. So let's start up front with that front seven. And the team runs a 3-4. I know it's a coaching change. So are they going to stick? Vance Joseph is there, I should say, and he's taking over. Is he? I'm not sure. I don't recall, but he's staying with the 3-4, correct?
Yep, we'd imagine he's staying with the 3-4. Same like single high, heavy looks. Probably a lot of man coverage underneath, which really should fit. Like the single high, you get Justin Simmons back there. Man coverage, you let Pat Surtain go up against number one receivers. That's kind of what you're looking at. We expect. Who really knows?
Okay, so then really when I look at this front seven, the thing that sticks out the most is the obvious need for edge rushing, more edge rushing help. So does that come?
That's exactly
so do you think maybe based on only a third rounder this year, not that you can't grab one, but the chances of that player becoming a big part of this year's team is unlikely. So do you say, well, maybe this is where we spend a little bit of money, like on a 1-year rental?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely the case for that. You'd probably be looking at a veteran in that spot. They've got a bunch of young guys, Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, all those guys. They probably want to be giving opportunities to, but again, you just need a little bit more production. So at Justin Houston, for example, somehow ageless, putting up 10 sack seasons at this point in his career. If you could get him on a cheap deal, that would be a great option. Yannick Ngakoue, just a lock for 8 sacks every season. Somebody like that where you're not breaking the bank, but you know you're getting production, that you could justify. But the tough part is, Randy Gregory's getting a lot of money to be your top edge rusher. Baron Browning, they flipped from inside linebacker to outside linebacker and loved what he did. The production was almost there, but it's his first season in the role. Nick Bonito was a second-round pick last year. You'd expect like a pure speed rusher like that to provide some pass rush in year 2. He struggled in year 1, though. Jonathan Cooper's been on the field a lot. They trade for Jake Martin. So they just have all these guys that you almost need to find a way to clear some out, recoup some value, especially when you don't have draft picks, if you're going to justify bringing in another edge rusher.
Yeah, I'm willing to give Bonito obviously another season or 2 as a rookie, second-round pick. So that's definitely a spot where they're anticipating an uptick. So, but I got to know more about Browning. So you talked about the switch, looked good. So what are they expecting out of Browning this season with this defense?
They're hoping that he can be an edge rusher that you want to have out there. An edge rusher that other teams will look at and say, look at the bend around the edge, look at the speed. Coming out of Ohio State, he was kind of an RAS freak. The speed, the shuttle, you look at all that stuff and say, wow, this is a really talented athlete. They get him in the 3rd round, play him at inside linebacker his rookie year, mostly out of need. It was kind of a tweener. They flip him to the outside last season. And again, it's really the bend that you look at. A couple of times you hear people say, like, wow, that one kind of looked like Von Miller out there, the way he turned that corner. And again, it just flashes at this point. He finished with like 5.5 sacks this season. it's a decent amount. It's enough to say, like, if you're giving him opportunities as he just turned 24, you can totally justify that. I think he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school too. But given what you've invested in the rest of this team, finding somebody who you just know
Of course.
is going to give you 8-10 sacks could be
They
tempting.
don't have that guy yet.
Exactly. But this is somebody who they want to get out there, who's a very talented player and has been productive and has flashed being very, very good.
Okay. Up front, Deshaun Williams, will he be back?
That's a tough one. So I kind of assumed that he would, just because, I think it was 4.5 sacks last year, which was more than he'd had in his entire career combined to that point. I thought that they could probably get him back on a cheap deal just because, it's 4.5 sacks. It's not grabbing anybody's attention. He's an older player. He's finally producing. It seemed like $1 or $2 million could kind of get it done. The fact they haven't done it yet probably means they're letting him test the market. But I'm just not really sure how that's all going to come through. Because, again, 4.5 sacks as an interior rusher, that is valuable.
And the kid from Iowa State, is he? We just talked about a 5th rounder on offense. So when you draft a 4th rounder on defense, same thing. I mean, there's expectations there. So do you think that that's a possibility that maybe Williams, they save a little money and Abuzarike winds up coming in and basically filling his spot? And if that's the case, do you think they're set? Or do you think, DJ Jones, do they like him? Is it just about depth at that point?
It is mostly about depth. I think it's about the back end of that rotation. I mean, with Zach Allen, with DJ Jones, those are kind of the top two. You've got Mike Purcell, who can be that nose tackle in there. And then last year was actually Matt Henningsen, the 7th-round rookie, who got himself into that rotation on the defensive line.
Oh.
Uzarike, and just kind of out of nowhere. Nobody really expected it. Uzarike in the last couple of games got more opportunities. Again, a couple flashes, but with him, I think it might be like a functional strength thing. He's a big guy. He's got quick feet for how big he is, but just making sure that you're taking advantage of being 325 pounds or whatever is the next step. But he could totally get into the rotation. And you look at last year, they lose Deshaun Williams, you lose Draymond Jones, so you're probably looking at adding 2 players to that rotation. Uzarike could be one. Matt Henningsen could be half of one. He was last year. And then you bring in Zach Allen, who fills one spot. So if you like it, then you could totally run with it. Could you also invest a 5th, 6th-round pick and hope you get lucky? That would make sense too. Deshaun Williams, maybe the easy answer if he's cheap, though.
Makes sense. And look, they spent a 4th and a 6th last year at the position, so why not do it again? All right, and then in the secondary, Jackson, Kareem is the only free agent there, and he's old to begin with. So is that really the only situation, the only issue in the defensive backfield is replacing Kareem Jackson? Even if they re-sign him, I'm not sure if that's the plan or not, but they have to definitely find the long-term answer aside of Simmons, or maybe does Caden Stearns slip into that role?
So the assumption has been that Caden Stearns fills that role. The tough part, though, is that he was hurt for the majority of last season, and that was kind of his opportunity to make his case and kind of solidify himself as the heir for Kareem Jackson. Kareem signed a $2 million deal last year. He hasn't retired yet. I'd imagine if you offer him the same deal, he might come back. That might be the safe route. He did kind of lose a step last year, but was still fine. Was still an average safety, maybe a little below average. Just a couple of mistakes in deep coverage that happens when you lose your legs. You could kind of put those two together and say, we'll get our strong safety out of one of the two. Or they say, we really like Caden Stearns, or they draft a guy. Delarian Turner-Yell didn't really make it onto the field last year. They didn't tender P.J. Locke, who was the other safety. So it is up in the air. They could totally justify going and investing in an outside safety, though, making Caden Stearns that number 3, finding a way to get into dime packages more. He spent a lot of time as their dime linebacker. But that's kind of how the safety position breaks down.
Okay. But overall, cornerback, the only thing you're looking at there is depth, or do they think, are they satisfied? Mathis is a rookie last year, and you have Williams. Are they satisfied with the other 2 corners opposite Surtain?
I think they are. We've been assuming that they are. So Ronald Darby goes down. Damari Mathis gets called for 4 pass interferences in that game, gives up like 100 yards in the next game. Terrible start. Everybody, the sky is falling, but was actually really good the rest of the season. So he finished the year with 10 really good starts, and he's just so fast, has the recovery speed. You can see him growing week to week. And again, I think fans really want him to be the starter opposite Pat Surtain with K1 Williams in the slot. K1 is probably locked into that role. The question again is, you could justify saying, hey, that was a rookie, and you can find opportunities to get 4 corners in the game, or maybe reducing K1's role a little bit. Using Damari's speed when you go up against a faster slot corner. Maybe you move him inside. But depth probably makes the most sense. Somebody who can honestly just be your 4th corner if you need him to patch a start for a week. If Damari doesn't play as well in year 2, you can go to him and not really have concerns. But I don't know.
By the way, does that mean that there's still, like, if they were to sign a veteran, do you think that would pretty much be it? Because you mentioned Turner Yell was a 5th round draft pick.
Yeah.
So do they just say, okay, we signed a veteran, we're fine, but if they don't sign one, we would anticipate that they might look for one in the draft?
Yeah, I think so. But if you draft a guy, you're probably drafting him expecting that he's your number 4 this year.
Depth
and
guy,
then
sure.
Exactly. And then your slot job comes open next year. So that might be what you look for, is somebody who maybe you can trust on the boundary, but can fill in for that slot job next year if everything goes well.
Got it. All right. Yep. Excellent. And overall, the special teams looks like it's going to be back completely the same.
Yeah. The Corliss Waitman struggled last year, the punter.
So there could be some competition there.
Yeah, so they tendered him the ERFA non-guaranteed $900,000, but I do think that they will bring in competition. Could save some money moving on from Brad McManus. He had a rough year as well. I think made 76% of his kicks. There's some long ones. Nathaniel Hackett put him in some pretty tough situations, but I do think that you probably just stick with Brandon. He's a proven player.
Okay, so maybe it won't be the biggest surprise in the world that they used a late round draft pick on a punter then.
Yep. Exactly. That would be the one to look at.
Okay. Fans really excited, I guess. I mean, this is 2 off seasons in a row that the fans, I mean, they're winning the off seasons, but now it's about translating that to the regular season, because I can imagine you get the hot offensive coordinator, coach. You thought that was going to work out, and Russell Wilson and all that. And then this year, of course, Sean Payton, at least there's a proven commodity there now. So it's almost like no matter what Russell did last year, you kind of feel a lot more confident now that Sean Payton's there. He'll figure out a way to get Russell Wilson going again.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, if you're a Broncos fan, that's the only hope you can cling to at this point.
Right.
If Sean Payton can't fix Russell Wilson, then nobody can. If this offensive line can't fix Russell Wilson, then nobody can. And that's why maybe you do upgrade the receivers. Maybe you do trade Courtland Sutton and go get somebody just to say, hey, we did our very best. It doesn't work. If we have to do something crazy and eat an $80 million cap hit next year, we can know that we did everything we possibly could to make it work.
Well, there's going to be some really good quarterbacks in next year's draft class.
That's true.
So if Russell Wilson he doesn't figure it out this year with Peyton, like you said, then maybe that's what they'll look at next year or so. But best case scenario, it all works out with Russell. Yep. And you never know. Denver could be a playoff team this year. That's how quickly things roll in the NFL. That's why we love it so much. Before I let you go, Henry, a little bit about where fans can find you. You've got not only the dnvr.com, the website address, but the YouTube channel, which is what, DNVR Sports?
Yep.
And
so
that's what you're on there a lot?
Totally. Yep. So Broncos show, hour long, hour plus, weekdays at noon Mountain Time. So come check that out. We had Alex Singleton on 5 days a week. Had Alex Singleton on today to talk about his new contract.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Film room's coming to thednvr.com. Broke down Ben Powers last night. I'll get a couple clips from the game against the Broncos from last season, week 3, the 11-10 Monday night game that everybody wants to relive. That'll be up tonight. All these free agents, whatever you want to know, will be on the website.
But yeah, by the way, I mean, I remember, again, not being a fan, but every time we would look at Denver at the end of the season and look at their schedule and what they did and what they went through in those overtime games, and those, it's like, oh my goodness gracious. I mean, I couldn't imagine being a fan of this team last year in all of those games, and you lost most of them.
Yeah.
But in a way, that's a good thing, because little tweak here, a little tweak there, those close losses become close wins.
Yep, and you just hope that Sean Payton is a big tweak, and who knows, maybe 10 wins isn't out of the question.
I don't think so. The biggest thing is that division and the AFC in general. So,
yeah,
I mean, as a Jet fan, it's like, oh, Sean Payton, man. I mean, do you have to bring another really good coach into the AFC? And then maybe as a Denver fan, if there's Aaron Rodgers things that's straightened out, it's like, oh, Aaron Rodgers? You got to bring Aaron Rodgers into the AFC too? I mean, come on.
And as a Broncos fan, we're saying, well, that should have been us. That was supposed to be Broncos last season. You get Nathaniel Hackett.
Oh, that's
Nathaniel
right.
Hackett
Yes.
brings Aaron Rodgers with him, and now it all just happens for him with the Jets. So we'll see if it works out.
All right, Henry. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and hopefully we get the opportunity to talk after the draft.
Oh, definitely.